Welcome to Change the Narrative. I'm your host, JD Fuller, an African-American licensed psychotherapist, professor, diversity coach, consultant, and author. We talk about the isms. We talk about the phobias, anything that marginalizes and oppresses. Everything we are not and everything we are is because of fear. Through a mental health lens, we'll have difficult conversations with celebrity guests, political activists, and everyone in between. Our mind will tell us whatever we want to believe, but the truth lives in the body, and that's where change occurs. Are you ready to change the narrative?
Marvin Toliver is a licensed clinical social worker, born and raised in East Oakland, California. Marvin currently resides in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, working as a therapist with the Radical Therapy Center. He's also a co-founder of the mental health collective Melanated Social Work. Marvin is a queer bisexual Black creator, writer, consultant, public speaker, mentor, wedding officiant, and radical educator. He encourages others to see the power within themselves and use their voices to fight for justice. Marvin's work will be complete when white supremacy is dismantled and all Black people are liberated. Welcome, Marvin. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation to come on and share space with me. It's always special to spend time with a fellow social worker, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So I like to start with a little background, all right? And I like to frame the questions so they're kind of focused. So the one I came up for you is, where did you grow up, first of all, just as a basic, but also, what was your greatest lesson learned before the age of 16?
Ooh, okay. Starting out hot. Okay. So I grew up in Oakland, California, East Oakland in the Bay Area, born and raised. Greatest lesson before 16. Ooh.
It's all retrospect. You know, our adult mind thinks differently about that period of time. So all retrospect.
I think for me, well, no, I guess I didn't learn that then. A lot of stuff I'm learning like now.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I wish my younger self would have known.
That's a later question.
This is a really good question. Before the age of 16, 16 was what, sophomore year, junior year of high school. I have never been stumped on a question.
I'm not trying to stump you. I'm sorry.
No, this is good. It's making me think. I think, so I had a lot of, I wanted to be kind of the, part of the cool kids and the cool crew. And I think one of the biggest lessons was that you don't have to be friends with everyone. Not everyone is meant to be friends with you. Not everybody is like deserving of, your friendship.
I love that.
And sometimes we just don't align, right? Like even at like such a young age, I was just like, like we're the same age, we look similar, but we're not aligned in our values. Yeah, I think that was the most important thing.
That was worth waiting for.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's a hard one for kids to learn at that developmental age.
Yeah.
And so to be able to reflect on that, I think is important. So the next one shouldn't be as difficult, but maybe. When and how did you first learn about racism and white supremacy?
Ooh.
Okay, it is.
So racism, my dad is very, very pro-Black.
Nice.
He grew up in Chicago. He was born in the 40s. He old, but he
Easy now.
Oh, wait a minute. I mean, he's mature.
Okay.
No, but he saw a lot of racism growing up in the 50s and 60s. He was marching. He was doing a lot of that stuff. And so he was very open about his, I'm going to say pro-Blackness. And he had not the nicest things to say about white people sometimes, which sometimes confused me, at such a young age. And I think the Bay Area is, as in my opinion, one of the one of the cities that's as close to, or areas that's as close to a melting pot as you kind of could see. At the time anyway. Now it's, with gentrification, it's a bit different. But at the time, you know, I had, you know, Mexican friends, I had Samoan friends, I had Vietnamese friends, I had white friends. Like, I didn't understand racism until I actually heard him. Like, I heard him talking about it, but then experiencing it was a little bit after high school. We were at, it had to be like a St. Patrick's Day parade or some parade or festival, some celebration that was happening in a city that was predominantly white, maybe like 25 or 30 or maybe 35 or 40 minutes away from Oakland. And we were drinking, and you know, this bike cop sees a guy that I went to school with, and we're all like just hanging out, walking together. He's walking like backwards, and you know, he's a little tipsy, so you're kind of all over the place when you're in that space. And so this bike cop stops right in the direction that this guy that I went to school with was walking. Like, he's like, my friend's kind of going this way. This bike cop rides his bike and stops so that my friend intentionally hits the bike cop.
I get it.
Or runs into him, and then he's arrested. And we're just like, wait, what just happened? And also, all of these belligerent white people around here, and this is the individual that you're going for? And so that was, I think, my first in-your-face experience with racism. It was just like, oh, this was intentional.
It's interesting because we have those moments that we can reflect on like that. But I bet if you spent time with it, there are so many more that came before that, right? But you just didn't name it.
Yeah.
And that's the nuance. That's the racial trauma. You know, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And so when you look back, say 5-10 years ago, what do you know now? Right? This is what the other question. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
5-10 years ago? Where were we? 2023, so that's 2013. So where am I? 2013.
You're so accurate. My goodness.
2014, I'm going to Boston College. So I'm right before Boston College. So, that's a lot of the identity stuff.
Right.
That's, I am enough. That is, I was still closeted at that time. So I was not comfortable with my sexuality at that time. I was searching for something that I needed to look within for.
So you know now that you it was all about the inside job.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was Boston College like for you, dealing with multiple identities?
Yeah. That experience, and this is, I'm learning it's similar for many people's experiences, that their experience in graduate school is always tough. Not only because of the schooling and internships and stuff, and I'm speaking specifically about MSWs or LPCs, folks that are therapists and counselors, but like outside life stuff also was like happening for a lot of people during that time too. And for me, Boston was a completely different city than I had ever lived in. I've lived in San Diego, I've lived in Miami, I lived in, and obviously living in Philadelphia and then in Oakland. And so Boston was just, it was cold in many different ways.
Right.
Not just in weather. My first winter was when they had Snowmageddon is what they called it. So that's when they had like snow up to like my knees and all of this stuff. And I just thought this is how winter was. Like, I'd never experienced snow or winter. Cold in that sense, but then also cold in like, people generally are just not kind. I remember working at an internship at a middle school and walking down the hallway, and when you're working with other teachers, and I've worked in school settings and summer programs and things like that, you say good morning.
Yeah, right.
Like it's just a common thing. You're walking, someone else is walking this way, you're saying good morning to them. People intentionally looked in the other direction as we were walking, and I'm just like, oh. You know, and so I'm like, is it because I'm black? Is it because I'm an intern? Is it because this just isn't the culture of I had no idea. I just remember it was weird. It did not feel welcoming. It did not feel warm. I mean, even, you know, first moving to Boston, I didn't have a place to live. So I was still in this period of trying to find housing. And I remember that I'd look on like Craigslist or whatever other things I was looking at the time, and everything was fine. You know, like me going to, you know, being in a master's program and kind of my style, what I like, you know, kind of those get to know you type things, because I was going to live with somebody. And then we do a video call, and all of a sudden communication stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, okay. So then I had to start saying, I'm a black African-American grad student going to Boston College, because I'm like, well, I don't know who's going to, you know, kind of ghost me again.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I talk to kids. I work in a school right now, and I talk to kids. It's a predominantly white school, but it's an international school. But because black kids have had the experience of being in this international school, they look at predominantly white colleges and they think, oh, well, I've had this experience, I'm good. And I know a few of them that look at Boston, and I say, you know, if you haven't spent time there, you don't know till you know. And I'm from the East Coast, so we know. But a lot of kids don't know. And so it's like, you need to know what you're getting yourself into. It's not an international place per se. It's still pretty segregated. And like you said, very obvious and very blatant. So I'm not surprised. Yeah. What made you choose Boston?
Yeah. So I mentioned that I lived in Miami. And so I moved there because I served 2 years with an AmeriCorps program called City Year.
Cool.
And so City Year, for folks that may not be familiar, it's under the AmeriCorps umbrella. And so it brings together 16 to 24-year-olds for 1 year of service, essentially. And it's working in the lowest performing schools in a certain city. And so I was in Miami-Dade County. I think at the time was either the 5th or 6th lowest performing school district in the state of Florida. And so I did that. I did 2 years actually with City Year. And so every year you get a stipend, which is like an education award. And then City Year also had what they call give a year partnerships. And so essentially it's you give a year of service and they will give you essentially like money or like a scholarship toward tuition for a certain number of universities and a certain number of master's programs. So there were obviously some for education, there were some for social work. I think there were a couple for psychology. And so, after moving back to Oakland after City Year, speaking to my previous supervisor, and she was just like, you should definitely be a social worker. They need more black men. You would be great at it. Looked into it, saw that Boston had a give a year partnership, and they were paying, I think they were paying like 50-ish% of tuition.
Oh.
And so I was like, okay, I can do that.
Hey, that's how they get us.
Yeah. And so, the boss that I was leaving at the job that I was at in Oakland was just awful. And I was like, I need to get a master's. I need to be in charge.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. So would you become a social worker again? Is this the career path that you would choose again after having been in it for a minute?
Today, the answer is yes.
Okay, that's fair. That's completely fair.
On other days, the answer is no.
I know. Can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. This work is hard. This work is hard. Hard is an understatement. I think when we say hard, I think we as, helpers and healers and social workers and therapists know what we mean by hard, and other people don't understand that it's hard is an understatement. But there are days where I'm drained. There are days when I feel like I've given all that I can give. And carrying people's stories, hearing people's traumas, the transference and countertransference that happens with clients. So maybe bringing things up in my own life,
right.
And overworked and underpaid, I think is something that, you know, was very common for me when I was working in, you know, in more community mental health and for the school district. Yeah, I mean, navigating systems, navigating individuals who are gatekeepers of these systems. I mean, if you're working with kids, you're not just working with kids, you're working with their parents and caregivers too, which can be a challenge. Different providers that you have to partner. It's like there's so many different
No, I get it.
people, and you don't know if these people are going to be actually helpful, or if you're going to be like, damn, this is another person that's going to, you know, add to the trauma and the, you know, everything else bad that's happening to my client.
Yeah.
Right. And so that part of it is horrible. I do not like that part at all. But, you know, on days like today, I'm in private practice, so that's lovely. I get to make my own schedule. I work virtually, so I can essentially work literally anywhere that has internet. It's so nice to see the clients that I've been working with for years, and just how far they've come. And so that for me is just always phenomenal. The men's group that I started is absolutely phenomenal. And now the monthly groups that came out of that. So building this community of Black men, right? Like all of this stuff is it's great, but it's also healing for me.
Yeah.
It's validating for me to know that I, you know, am in the right field and that I've made the right decision.
You know, I'll say to any therapist that comes on here, and I actually say it because I teach graduate school sometimes as an adjunct, and I will say, don't get it twisted. All of us came to this field because we want some of what we're going to be giving. We didn't come here by accident, and we didn't come here to get rich. It's because it has this, you know, corrective experience for us in our lives and in our profession. But I also can echo what you've said. You know, I'm over 25 years in social work world in general, and you know, at one point I felt like I lost my soul, and that's as a result of systems that are marginalized and white supremacist in nature, not in nature, in structure, and everything you said. I just want to echo everything you said there, so I can relate to that. You know, I was in a class last night. I teach at the Psychoanalytic Institute in California, and the class is on the decolonization of mental health. And one of the professionals asked, "What do you mean by that?" And so I thought, I want to ask Marvin that. What do you think of that? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, you know, I went on Instagram Live with a woman. Her name is Mashara D. Winston. And she talks about moving toward whole community care rather than just like individual care, and kind of how our healthcare system, especially around mental health, is very individualized, right? We very much focus on an individual therapist seeing an individual client. And then there's even separation between those two individuals too, right? And something that she said that was really like eye-opening, and I'm just like, oh yeah, is that we need to lean into the traditions and into the customs of our ancestors. She said that, you know, mental health did not start when the American Psychological Association said that it started, right? Like our ancestors have had cultures, have had customs, have had practices, have traditions. And many of those things were actually stolen by white folks and then kind of made, they coined it something different. Or we just don't use them.
Yeah.
Or they're kind of not vilified. What's the word? Like things like voodoo, right?
Yeah.
Things like more spiritual heal, like even Reiki for some people, right? People may see it as this other kind of thing and not like proper therapy, right? And so when we talk about decolonized mental health, it's really looking at where we are and really looking at it from not the lens of cisgender heterosexual white men, but looking at it from the lens of the most marginalized folks, right? And so are the most marginalized folks gonna have the same therapeutic experience as a rich cisgender heterosexual white man in the practices that we've been taught? No, And I'll say, in my experience, no.
Yeah,
Maybe other
no,
people
true.
have, and it's fine. But in my experience and the experience of a lot of Black and brown therapists, a lot of these theories, a lot of these practices, a lot of these ways that we are supposed to show up as therapists are really unnatural to us, and are actually, widening the gap between, what care, in my opinion, should look like. Right.
No, just something just like came up for me as you said that, and
Yeah.
the idea of that in Black and brown communities, and part of the global majority, mental health is stigmatized. I think you just switched something for me, which is the Eurocentric format of mental health. The white supremacist structure of mental health is stigmatized. But when you
Yeah.
think about it from a multicultural, ancestral lens, health, mental health, spiritual health is not pathologized. It's actually considered the primary process in healing. So I love the way that's framed, and I love that shift that I just had. Thank you.
And and I just did a keynote at the Texas School Social Work Conference, which was a really great
Congratulations.
experience. Thank you. And so the title was Pushing the Boundaries, How Radical Social Work Leads to Liberation for All. And so I actually go through a bit of the history around how the social work and the mental health field has been harmful, primarily to Black, brown, indigenous folks. And these are only a number, like a few things, a few ways. But things like drapetomania, right? Like this diagnosis, is as the explanation in the 1800s as to why enslaved Africans continue to run away from their slave masters. It must be a mental health, issue for these folks, right? Who doesn't want to be whipped and, and tortured? Right?
Imagine.
Hysteria, when we think about how women mostly were given that diagnosis, and these were women that were brutally traumatized. These were folks who were raped, who were beaten, who were just like not able to live freely. They're just a hysterical, crazy woman, right? And so like there are numerous ways in which this field has been incredibly harmful and incredibly problematic, and I think that we really have to start looking in the mirror, right, as social workers, as healers, as helpers, and really and really start to be intentional about what we're doing and knowing why am I doing this with my client? Is this the best plan of action for my client? Do I need to tweak something a little bit?
Yeah, that's
So
great.
decolonized mental health, I think, is really leaning in to ancestral and root work, and taking what works from what we've been taught and intentionally and explicitly stating that some of these things don't work and maybe we shouldn't be doing them anymore.
Yeah, the idea that what you said about harm, right? So we're in the profession
Yeah.
of do no harm, and actually, there's a lot of harm that's been done in the face of this work. And I say all the time to classes, I hope I'm alive for the day when the global majority starts to realize all of the unethical treatment it has received in the face of medical and mental health, and there is a class action lawsuit that shakes the entire system up because it is so deep and it's just not known. And I love the idea of shifting that focus again to consider what worked in the past and what doesn't work now. That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And congratulations on that keynote. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So we're at the point now where I still have many more questions for you. So I'd love to pause here. Thank you for the first half of the podcast. And we're going to get into a little bit of your social media in the next episode, and also, of course, your TED Talk. So we'll
Ooh,
join you again in the next episode. Look forward to it.
sounds good.